Good afternoon, and thank you for standing by. As a reminder, today's conference call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Monica Adams. Thank you. You may begin.
Hi, this is Paige Hausberg. We are here today to talk about the Tribal Budget Toolbox. Thank you for joining us on this call. In 2016, the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement, in collaboration with the Office of Grants Management, convened a tribal budget workgroup to develop guidelines, supportive documentation, and helpful tools to encourage and promote consistency and uniformity in the annual budget submission process. The workgroup's objectives included the creation of budget tools for use in budget development along with general guidance. This Tribal Budget Toolbox includes various helpful hints and tools a tribe can elect to use to streamline the budget development process for their child support program. This guide is not a policy document and does not replace existing federal regulations, statutes, or OCSE policy guidance documents, which take precedence. The tribal child support budget submission process can be frustrating and time-consuming. We know that. This year, the Office of Grants Management and the Office of Child Support Enforcement partnered to develop a toolbox for the budget submissions. We know we have to make changes to the process so we can better serve you. We are excited about the growth of the Tribal 4D programs. We want to have an efficient and effective budget submission process so you can get back to work of serving your communities. At the end of this session, you will be able to understand the components of a complete budget package, know how to use new tools for budget development, be aware of best practices and pitfalls to avoid for a smooth budget approval process. Grant Solutions remains voluntary, but with this new toolbox, Tribe will get talking points to help with tribal meetings, an itemized checklist of what you need, detailed guidance on requirements, standardized forms for both budget and the narrative, and training materials. More helpful tools, resources, and training materials will be added to the toolbox in the future as they are developed. Now I'd like to turn it over to Rachel Freitas, who will introduce you to the tool that will help you explain to others how the child support funding works.
Thank you, Paige. My name is Rachel Freitas, and I'm a program specialist with the federal office in San Francisco, also known as the Region 9 office. So we thought it would be helpful to include in the toolbox a document that child support directors and staff may use as talking points. You may use this information on federal funding and the budget process to educate tribal council, fiscal staff, and other partners and stakeholders. The talking points are high-level and brief. The document provides information in easy-to-understand terms that are not too technical or program-specific, in case the presentation is intended for an audience not familiar with the child support program. It is also written in the first-person voice so that directors and staff may bring this with them to meetings and use it directly if you choose. Now I'm going to open up the talking points document so you can see a screenshot of what it looks like. And I'll show you. It's just a few pages, 2 pages, in bulleted form. First page. The talking points highlight the following: the use of federal funds for allowable child support activities, the federal funding period, the program match rate, types of non-federal share matches, either cash or third-party in-kind donations, time frames for submitting a budget and receiving notice of grant award, components of a budget submission packet, how budgets are estimates and are not required to be spent in full, Grant Solution as a vehicle to submit budgets and communicate with ACF if the tribe chooses to use it, budget modifications, and the federal program and financial reports, both quarterly and annual reports. Paige, I'll now hand it back to you to cover budget timelines and funding levels. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. We know that many tribes' budgets are already in Tribal Council by July 1st. Trying to get to the next slide. Sorry. That's why we want to make sure that we get this information to you both early and often. So we will be presenting this information again during the National Tribal Child Support Conference. Budget timelines for the comprehensive child support programs include a budget package due date of August 1st, and the funding cycle is from October 1st to September 30th. We're really excited to introduce you to these new tools and guidance we've created to help standardize and simplify your budget submission process. As a reminder, the Startup Funding Program is 100% federal funds, and the Comprehensive Program funding requires a non-federal share. For the first 3 years, the federal government pays 90% of the cost, and the tribe has to come up with a 10% non-federal share. In years 4 and on, the federal government pays 80% of the cost, and the Tribal Child Support Office pays 20% of the non-federal share. The non-federal share can be cash or in-kind contributions. For instance, if a tribal judge is hearing child support cases for 10 hours a week and the tribe is allocating those hours as the non-federal share, that is a cash match because the tribe pays the judge's salaries. An in-kind match is a true donation of services. If that same judge heard child support cases for 10 hours a week and did not receive any salary, that is a donated service and considered an in-kind contribution. I'm now going to turn this over to Tammy Masuka, who's going to walk you through these new tools and how to use them.
Thank you, Paige. Hi, I'm Tammy Masuka, a program specialist in the Region 5 Office of Child Support Enforcement. Prior to coming to the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement 3 years ago, I worked exclusively in tribal child support and used a lot of these tools within the programs that I operated. Reading through 63 budget proposals each year within a relatively short time frame can be very daunting when each proposal is formatted in a different way. Reviewers have specific information they look for, and when information is missing or camouflaged within the budget proposal, it can cause the review and approval process to be slower than necessary. To promote and encourage uniformity in all budget proposals, the work group created and compiled information to help you create a uniform and organized budget packet. We put all the information into one document titled Tribal Child Support Budget Packet for easy review by you. All the templates that we'll be talking about today are available for downloading from OCSC's Tribal Page website. They are listed under the Tribal Child Support Budget Toolbox. But backing up now for a minute, the document includes a brief introduction along with information about budget submission methods, including the use of grant solutions that we'll cover a little more in depth later. The main body of the document begins with an annual Tribal Child Support Budget Checklist template. The checklist template is supplemented by detailed information that includes citations in an attachment. In addition to the items required by regulation to be included in your budget submission, OCSC also recommends including a cover letter. Most people include that already with their budget submission. A cover sheet, which is optional, but a nice addition to the package, to have the cover sheet that clearly indicates your program name, address, and contact information, along with your logo. It also helps the packet look a little more polished. And then a table of contents. The table of contents allows reviewers to easily locate information from your budget packet. In addition to those in the checklist, the standard form SF 424, 424A, a quarter-by-quarter estimate, budget justification narrative, and supporting documentation should be included in your budget packet. The most important piece of your budget packet is the standard form 424. You can download the form from grants.gov, fill it out, save it, and print it. However, if you are using Grant Solutions to submit your budget, you must use the online fillable 424 form that is in Grant Solutions. An uploaded hard copy will not be accepted. Please make sure you have your authorized tribal representative sign page 3 of this form. One of the most common reasons a funding award is delayed is because this form was submitted without a signature. The second most important piece of your budget packet is the standard form 424A. You can download this form also from grants.gov, fill it out, save it, and print it. But again, if you are using Grant Solutions to submit your budget, you must use the online fillable 424A form that is in Grant Solutions. An uploaded hard copy will not be accepted. Although the forms are fairly easy to complete, for anyone who is new to using them, your Office of Grants Management contact person can assist you with any questions you might have. Section B on page 2 of the SF 424A lists all the budget categories broken down into quarters. This is sufficient to meet the regulations regarding a quarter-by-quarter estimate. However, as you will see when we review an Excel worksheet later, the new Excel worksheet tool we've created for you is also broken into quarters that make it easy for you to translate amounts from that worksheet to the SF 424A. Finally, Section D is where you will identify your total budget, the federal share amount you are requesting, and the non-federal share or tribal match amount that you have identified. I know some tribal programs are required to complete program budgets as early as July, as Paige mentioned, to submit to their tribal councils or finance committees, and oftentimes the tribal format you're required to follow is different than the federal format. Gauging from the variety of narrative formats I've seen, some tribes submit their narratives based on their tribal budget requirements, which makes reviewing the narrative for accuracy quite difficult. As a reminder, I want to reiterate that OCSE and OGM have to review each of your budgets, all 63 plus of them, between the date you submit it, which is on or before August 1st, and October 1. The review and award process will be much easier and faster if all budget packets are in a uniform order. This includes your budget justification narrative. Please organize expense categories in the same order as they are listed on the standard form 424A. Include columns to identify the federal share you're requesting, plus the non-federal share that you have identified, separated into columns for cash and in-kind contributions that total your total budget. Organizing the narrative in this format will allow the Office of Grants Management reviewers to easily establish whether you have included all the necessary information to enable them to give you a favorable review and timely notice of award. And I'm going to just quickly go through this tribal child support budget packet that I was just talking about. It has, again, just some general information for you. Table of contents so you can easily find what you're looking for when you're looking back to reference. A brief introduction about the work group and how we came to develop these tools. Some general information and links for Grant Solutions. Where to submit your budget application if you're submitting it via hard copy. The packet also includes some helpful hints throughout. On this particular page, it has the actual one-page annual tribal child support budget checklist that the tribe can just print off, and you can use it to remind yourself what you've already completed and what you still need to complete by checking the yes or no boxes. It includes information about the standard forms 424 and 424A, and they're included in the budget packet in the order of how it should appear in your actual budget packet. Doing the 424 with the authorized signature, followed by the 424A. your budget justification narrative and supporting documentation. And we're going to be looking at the budget justification narrative in Excel format in just a moment. We've also created a budget justification narrative in Microsoft Word for those who might not want to use Excel. So there's some examples in the packet that show you how you can format that and what information to include. It gives a lot of examples, description, how to calculate it, and what kind of justification you should indicate in your narrative document. It also includes addendums, including the benefits of submitting a tribal child support budget via Grant Solutions, a second addendum that has much more detailed information to go along with that one-page checklist, including citations to all the federal regulations. And Addendum 3, which includes information on IT contracts, equipment, and supplies, along with some helpful hints and some example language. Okay, the workgroup developed 2 templates that you can choose from, the Excel worksheet narrative or the Microsoft Word document. Although OCSE and OGM prefer the Excel worksheet format, it might not accommodate everyone's needs and does require some knowledge of Excel. The nice thing about the Excel template is that it is formatted with formulas, so it does many of the calculations for you. It is also available to modify, so if you need to add some lines or make a few adjustments to accommodate the size of your program, you'll be able to do that as well. The second option is the narrative formatted in a Microsoft Word document. This template lays out the organization of the narrative, but you have to complete all of the calculations either using Excel, an adding machine, or with pen and paper. Once you complete all your calculations, then you need to return to the document and enter them into the narrative format. This method leaves a lot of room for human error. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the Excel workbook now. This workbook includes cells for calculations and areas for free-form text, allowing you to use this one workbook for both your justification narrative and your calculations. There's no need to do calculations and then write them into the Word document. And I'm going to do a screen share at this point and actually walk through some of the screens with you. Okay, this is the Excel Budget Justification Worksheet. On tab 1 are instructions and a checklist that you can go through to make sure that you've covered, included everything in your packet. So the standard form, 424, 424A, your quarter-by-quarter estimate, if the tribe or tribal organization is requesting funding for indirect cost, documentation, and you go right down the list. It also has a few budget basics, some definitions of, the federal year, reminding you that it begins October 1 and ends September 30th each year. Allowable cost, talks a little bit about the startup budgets and the amounts that Paige had spoke to earlier, and about the comprehensive program plan budgets. And it has some helpful hints. Budget templates, using complete and accurate calculations. One helpful hint that I always found really useful was gathering up all the necessary information you'll need prior to starting work on your budget, so that when you sit down and actually start working, you have everything in front of you that you'll need. Tab 2 is an actual sample. This is formatted so all of the yellow highlighted areas are areas that you can add your own information in. At the top, there's a place to enter your child support program name, the fiscal year, the federal match rate, the tribal match rate, And then underneath are the yellow areas where you can add all of your positions, annual hours, the wage for each position, and they automatically calculate across the line. Also, if you noticed as I was moving through these different cells, there are instructions that are included when you highlight over. Any cell that has a little red triangle will have a comments box with instructions attached to it. So when you enter the different positions, their annual hours, and their wage, it'll automatically calculate across each quarter and give you a total. And then for those positions that you might be using as either cash match or in-kind match for the non-federal share, you can actually enter those amounts in the far right-hand columns J and K to give you the totals of how much of each position that you're using to meet your match. So in this particular sample budget worksheet, it actually shows you different examples of how the information would look as you go through it, all the way down to the bottom of total cost. And I'm going to go now to tab 3, which is the same exact tab, same exact format we were just on, but I want to just give you an example of how you can type through it, tab through it, and put your information. So you would type in your tribal program name, and then tab to your fiscal year, tab to your federal match rate, and this can be whatever your match rate is at the time. As Paige mentioned earlier, if you're in year 1 through 3, it would be 90% federal, 10% tribal match. If you're in year 4 and beyond, it would be 80-20. However, there are some tribes that when they're transitioning from the startup to, from the 90-10 to the 80-20, depending on when their transition period is, there are some tribes that might have, 85 federal match rate. So we've accounted for those types of variances so that you can type in your match rate in these particular cells. So here I'm typing 80 and 20. And then I tab down, and if I type in the director and tab, you'll notice that I typed it in the yellow area in column A, but down a little bit further on row 21, it automatically filled that area. And this would be the area then where you would write your justification, including a brief description of the roles and responsibilities of that particular staff. Then you go in column B, line 9, and I'm going to type in for full-time hours, 2,080 hours, and I'm just going to pick a random number for wages. We're going to say this particular position is $30 an hour. When I type that in and then I hit my tab button, you'll see that it will fill in column D. It fills in the total salary, and then it also fills in quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then column 9, the total salary again. You would fill each of those positions in just by tabbing through. So you have your child support manager at 2080 hours at $17 an hour, and I hit the tab button, and again, it fills it in completely. Then if I get down to, let's just say, the judge in the matter is going to work part-time, so you're using a percentage of his time, and you calculate that out to what it comes out per year, times whatever amount of money he gets per hour for his work. In this case, I'm going to use $50 an hour. And you can see, again, when I hit the tab button, it fills in all of those spaces. However, now I want to use the judge's time as a cash match to meet my non-federal share. So if I look in if you look in column I, line 11, the total amount that is owed to the judge for the time for that year is $26,000, and we're going to use that as part of our match. So I'm just going to go in the yellow column here and type in that $26,000. And then you'll see down at the line 20 across the bottom, it actually totals up all the way across what each of the salaries are. So in column D, you've got of the three that I typed in, the total salaries for the year, $123,760. It shows the totals for each quarter, again, the full total, and then the total for the cash. Now let's say we have an assistant judge who's going to be hearing cases, again, 520 hours a year, and the assistant judge makes $45 an hour. And I tab, and again, that fills it in. However, however, instead of paying the assistant judge cash or the tribe paying it, this particular judge is going to give his time for free. He's volunteering or donating his time to the child support program. So I can enter that under the non-federal share in-kind column as an in-kind donation, third-party donation. And again, that totals. So you would do that for all of your different personnel. As you can see, as I scroll down, when I typed in up here in the yellow, it fills in automatically down here in the total personnel justification area. And this is where then you would, again, type in a brief justification narrative about the job's responsibilities and the duties of each position. Very similar to what you're already doing now in a Word document. Now, as I scroll down further, we get down to the fringe. And again, this is set up in the order that the 424 is organized in. We have either a lump sum of fringe, because we recognize that some tribes give their programs just, okay, take 25% of total salaries for your fringe benefits. So if your tribe does a lump sum, you can just simply type in, okay, 25% of salaries, and as I tab, you can see it fills in all the way across on line 63. And then when I get over here to the JK columns, it also calculates out the time for both the cash and in-kind donation amounts. However, if your tribe uses individual amounts for each of the items, you can go across and type in each of those. And I'm just going to pick some random numbers here. And as I enter, again, it calculates out based on the salaries, the different amounts. And you would do that for each benefit down the list, and it'll calculate it all out. The same with health insurance. For instance, if health insurance was going to cost for a single person $100 a year, and you've got two staff that are single family or single people insurance, and you tab, again, it'll calculate it out. If you have for family health insurance, so let's just say it's $500 a year, and you've got 5 staff that have the family plan, you type that in, again, it'll calculate it out. The same with life insurance and disability. Again, however, if these amounts for health insurance, life insurance, and disability are all included in that lump sum of fringe, you would just put it all in that lump sum. Moving down to the travel line item, again, I want to remind everybody that anything in yellow is unlocked cells where you can enter free-form text. So in this particular cell, I would just type in as my overall narrative, for instance, all calculations are based on information from airline sites, such as like Delta, United, whatever airline you most commonly use, maybe Travelocity, if you're calculating out like hotel rates or rental car rates, et cetera. So you would type in your justification there. The next tab over would be enter the name of the conference meeting in this cell. So, for example, we're going to put the National Tribal Child Support Association meeting. We're going to enter in that there'll be 5 staff attending, and costs are for hotel, etc. So that would be hotel, per diem, and all of that. And then you would actually have to, unfortunately, because there's so much detail in travel, you'd actually have to kind of calculate that out with pen and paper to determine, what the total of all the costs are for your 5 staff attending. And then look at which quarter that you would be attending in. For NTCSA, it's in quarter 3, and let's just say, for example's sake, it's going to cost $6,000 for 5 staff to attend that. And then you would type that in. Enter the location. This year the conference is in Tulalip, Washington. And then you enter the dates, and the dates of this year's conference are June 26th through 30th, 2016. And then this area, again, is justification for the travel for this particular conference. So you would enter in, again, like you would in your narrative in years past, in whatever format you used. You would type in the reason that you're sending 5 staff, or if you're maybe sending a judge or an attorney, entering the justification as you would to justify the travel for all those staff. And you would do that for each travel that you're including in this budget down the list. This is also available to add. So as you can see here, there's probably room for, I think, about 6 or 7. If you have more travel, you would just add that on. If you're unsure of some upcoming travel, like let's say, for instance, you might know that there's going to be some tribal consultation or a tribal meeting, it's potentially going to be in FY16, you just don't have the dates or locations, you can add that in there and just, again, estimate it. And I want to remind everybody, as you're doing your budgets, remember that this is merely an estimate of what your costs are going to be for the year. Okay, moving down, we have equipment. So let's say you need a server or a new server to update your networking for your office automation or for MTS or whatever. You would look up, find out how much the server would cost. You would attach the information as an attachment. So, for instance, your justification would be, we need to update our server to accommodate more staff. Details of server and attachment A. So as you're justifying and including attachments, make sure then later when you're putting your packet together that you're listing your attachments in order of when you reference them here in your narrative. And let's say that you're going to buy that in the first quarter and it's going to cost you $7,000. You would put that there. However, you can also, let's just say, for instance, it's the tribal administration is also updating some stuff, and they have to go to a larger server to accommodate their needs, but the server they have is perfectly good. So they're saying, well, gee, we can donate this to you. You could actually then put that $7,000 as part of your non-federal share in-kind donation, and then that would be included towards meeting your match. And then, of course, supplies. These would be consumable office supplies such as, your daily pens, papers, staples, such and such like that. So you would just enter all of those here in a list. You could even just put, general office supplies, which would cover kind of, your day-to-day stuff. Pens, paper, etc. And then split it up, unfortunately, because, again, this is has so many variables, we couldn't include specific calculations, but you can at least go in and say, okay, I figured on pen and paper, on average it's going to cost us about $300 a quarter for basic office supplies. Or depending on how big your office is, it might be $3,000 a quarter. And again, you can see it'll automatically calculate it up in column 9. Again, if there's anything that the tribe might be either paying for or donating to you, then you would add those costs in column J and K to help meet your non-federal share. Moving down is contractual. Again, enter the name of the contract, whether it's a DNA contract or maybe you have a consultant that you're contracting with. Excuse me. You would enter a brief justification about that contract and why you're contracting, and then include the contract as an attachment, keeping in mind that we recognize that until you're funded, you generally can't execute those contracts. So we ask that you please include a copy of the contract, and then just note in your narrative that as soon as your funding is awarded and you've actually get all the signatures needed on the contract, that then you will submit a fully executed contract. One point to keep in mind is make sure that the dates on the contract are for the same date as the fiscal year. And if you have contracts that are ongoing, in other words, you signed a contract with your DNA company, and instead of doing a new contract every year, it just kind of renews itself, and it will only stop if one or the other parties provides written confirmation that the budget would be ended, or the contract would be ended. If that's the type of contract that you're using and submitting, just make a note of it in your narrative so that as the reviewers are going through it and they look at that contract that says it expired in 2012, without having to go back and reading all the little details, they can clearly see in your narrative right off the bat that, oh, this is a renewable contract every year, so we're not going to worry so much about the date. And then moving down on to other. Other would be the area where you would put all your other anticipated expenses, such as maybe copy toner, postage, your phone expenses, maybe cell phone expenses, maintenance, different items like that. Again, they have to be allowable costs, and you would put the justification just like you've always have in your written narrative. And then again, because there's so many variables, you'd actually have to calculate out these costs per quarter and enter them costs. So let's just say, for an example, you're calculating your postage. You would enter your narrative here, or your justification actually, and then let's just say your postage is going to be $200 a quarter. And then you just type it in across to get your total of $800. When we move down further, you can see that on line 138, it's total direct cost of everything that we've typed in above, including the non-federal share for both cash and in-kind contributions. There's also a section for adding your indirect costs. You would type in this particular sample, we're having you use the percentage of salaries only. So let's say it's 30% of salaries only. However, some of the tribal programs have, for example, it's maybe 30% of the total budget minus contracts, or it's 20% of salaries only minus contracts. So again, you can modify the format of this to account for those changes. But in this particular initial format, it's based on salaries only. So it'll calculate out all the costs quarterly and totals based on 30% of the salaries only. And then, of course, line 140 is the totals all the way across. And then we broke it down further. So if you remember way up at the top, I had typed in that we're at an 80-20% rate. So this will calculate your total budget based on the information that I just typed in here for an example, is $220,780. Your federal, 80% of the federal share would be $176,624, and the non-federal share, 20% that the tribe will have to come up with, is $44,156. So if you look in columns J and K here for your totals on line 14243, the non-federal share that was identified but by what you typed into these cells comes to $104,980, which is, as you can see, way more than what you would actually need to meet that federal share, non-federal share, excuse me. So this can help you to make adjustments. It's easily identifiable. So because we're so far over, let's just for examples, we're going to take out that $7,000 for the server. And if I scroll back down, you'll see that it reduced it. And you can kind of play around with your budget that way. So up here, I've got $45,000, which I can see I totally put in the wrong amount there, but we're going to change that to 0 and scroll back down. And you can see now that your non-federal share identified as $35,880. You need $44,156. So then you could go back up and make the adjustments to how much of that donated time or how much of that cash in kind of maybe the judge or the associate judge or maybe a receptionist do you need to try to get these two numbers as close as possible. And in the bottom part here, again, we wanted to recognize that the above formatting might not accommodate everybody's needs. So this particular section here is just basically an area for free-form text that you can add in anything additional that you might want to more specifically identify in a justification narrative for your cash or in-kind non-federal share. And then finally, tab 4 is just a budget at a glance. It pulls in all of the information from the budget that I was just typing in, except for your tribal program name. You would have to type that in there. This budget at a glance is also very useful when you're looking at and entering your numbers into your 424A, because it's just everything's right there, very clear and very easy to see. It's also very clear and very easy to see for the reviewers. Okay, so the nice thing about using this Excel workbook is that all your calculations are right at the tips of your fingers. You can fill out this worksheet, save it as fiscal year 16, and then you can actually, and I'm going to try doing this. If you go to page layout, you can actually, well, maybe I can't do that. Yep, here we go. Go to view and you go to page layout, and it'll actually show you what it would look like once you print it out. And then you can print out these pages to submit as your hard copy in your budget packet. So again, your calculations are right there. Then next year, when it comes time to do your budget, you just pull up the same budget, do a save it as federal fiscal year 17, go back into the budget and just make any updates that are needed. For most tribes, all of your positions are going to stay the same. The hours generally stay the same. The wage per hour may fluctuate a little bit, but everything else, like the justification narrative, you most likely won't need to update that unless you get new positions or a change in the responsibility of the positions. So after you get this initial budget developed, in years to follow, it's just a matter of going in and updating it and saving it as the new fiscal year. It's going to save you a ton of time. I'm going to catch myself up here on the PowerPoint real quick. Okay, so trying to accommodate as many budget developers as possible, and for those who simply either dislike using Excel or just aren't proficient at using Excel, we also created a budget justification narrative template in Microsoft Word. You do not have to do both, and I really want to stress this. You can choose to use either the Excel workbook narrative or the Word document. you do not need to use both. Unlike the Excel template, this template does not calculate on its own. As I already mentioned, you'll need to do that separately and then transfer all of your information into the template. So again, I'm going to do a share, and I'm going to bring up that Microsoft Budget Justification Narrative in Microsoft. So it's formatted very similar as far as an order as the Excel worksheet, and keeping in line with the order of the 424A. But unlike the Excel format, you're actually going to have to type in everything. So your tribal program name, and then you actually have to move through it using, you can't tab through it. You'd actually have to put your cursor on the different areas and type in the different information. And then when it comes down here, this was your budget at a glance that, if you remember, in the Excel worksheet automatically populates as we develop the budget. This does not. So for now, we would skip this page and go down to the actual narrative. It has a brief description of what this category must include, calculations, and justification. So again, you would have to type in your positions, your FTEs. You can either do, like 1.0 FTE, which is full-time, and then your 2080 hours times $30 per hour equals, and then you'd actually have to go to pen and paper or calculator, calculate whatever that out is, enter it there, and then calculate 80% of that and enter it in this area here, and then whether or not you were using any of that amount for cash or in-kind donation. And you would have to do that for each one of your job positions. A lot of the tribes are already doing this format, and as you can see, compared to the Excel format that I just tabbed through, this is going to take you a lot more time. Then you would go down, just like you probably already are doing, and enter in your justification for your job duties and responsibilities. And you would do that for each one of your positions. And this has a full page. And again, this one too, you can add extra lines. Again, going into the fringe, you would have to do all your fringe calculations by hand, either by individual, FICA, SUTA, Medicare, or the lump sum, and do all your calculations and then calculate out what the federal share is of that, what the cash and or in-kind amounts would be based on the calculations. The same with travel. You would calculate out. The only difference now with Microsoft Word compared to the Excel is you could actually separate them out. So you can put airline and then put your calculations, with the cost per staff, and you can list it out a little easier in the Word document than you would in the Excel, simply because of the difference in format. So you would do that for each travel. So again, you would put in the conference name, the dates, location, number of staff attending, and then you would narrate all of your justification calculations. And you would do that for each meeting, conference, travel that you're attending. So we've tried to include enough spaces there to accommodate most of the major meetings. But again, you can also add to this to include additional travel. There's also a small section here for like local travel, your mileage back and forth between your child support program and maybe the tribal court or tribal administration. And then again, the next section is for equipment. Again, you would name the item, if you're getting a server, description, your federal share again, and then down here your justification. Again, calculating everything out, pen and paper or using a separate Excel sheet. Quite honestly, if I was doing this and needing to use a separate Excel spreadsheet to figure out my calculations, I'd just as soon stick with that Excel spreadsheet. And this goes down through, again, contractual, other, total direct charges, your indirect costs, your total budget. But again, unlike the Excel spreadsheet, you would actually have to calculate out on your own of all of the non-federal share, do I have enough to meet the amount of federal share that is required. So because it doesn't calculate, the downside of using this format is that if you change one amount anywhere in this document, you'll have to go back and recalculate all your totals to make sure that everything totals up correctly. This lends for potential mathematical errors, whereas in the Excel template, if you change one amount, because everything totals up and calculates, it'll automatically change all your totals. So again, eliminating human error. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to the PowerPoint here and catch up to where we left off. So if you are using grant solutions, regardless of which of these options you choose to use, whether you choose to use the Excel format or the Microsoft Word, you can print the product, scan it, and upload it into Grant Solutions along with your other documents. However, but I just want to remind you, if you are using Grant Solutions, you must complete the standard form 424 and 424A in Grant Solutions, and then upload all your supporting documents, which would include either the Excel or the Microsoft Word justification narrative and your supporting documentation. So moving on to the next section, please include all your supporting documentation in order of when it was referenced. And I mentioned this as I was going through. If you have different attachments, whether it's a job description or your IT specs or contracts, when you're putting them in your narrative, list them in order, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and then when you put your packet together, make sure they're in that same order. Makes it a lot easier for the reviewers to find them when they have to cross-reference things. If you're using Grant Solutions to submit your budget, all the documents need to be uploaded individually. The narrative templates, the indirect cost agreement, the individual supporting documents. Don't scan all your documents into one scan and then upload it all. Scan them all individually, name them all individually, and then upload them individually. Your current indirect cost agreement must also be included. If the tribe is in the process of renegotiating a rate, please use the indirect cost rate based on the tribe's most recently completed fiscal year and include a copy of your request for a new negotiated rate. You will then need to submit the new indirect cost agreement to OCSC as soon as it becomes available. If you do not include a copy of the current indirect cost agreement or a copy of your request for a new negotiated rate, Office of Grants Management might use a historical rate, or your indirect cost may be disallowed. Pursuant to 45 CFR 309.130, you must also include a statement that the tribe has or will have the non-federal share of program expenditures available as required. And again, as I mentioned with contracts, all contracts must be included, and they must comply with the various requirements stated throughout the regulations and policy documents, including PIQT-13-01. The budget packet document includes very detailed information about IT contracts, equipment, and supplies. I touched on that briefly earlier, but please make sure that you read through that and submit draft copies of contracts that have not yet been executed with your narrative indicating that you will submit copies of those executed contracts as soon as they are available. If your program is thinking about requesting a waiver, please review all of the requirements in 45 CFR 309 for all the necessary details. Please include all other supporting documentation as applicable. For example, if you're adding a new position to the program, you will need to submit a copy of the job description to support your narrative justification of the new position. Okay, thank you for your time. I know this has been a lot of information, and I know that in general, change can be very challenging. But I hope you find the tools and the budget packet helpful and that you'll use them when you begin developing your federal fiscal year budget. Again, just a reminder, organize your supporting documents as attachments in order of reference. Make sure you include all your supporting documents and put your budget packet together for submission. And now please welcome Lydia Peel, who will review important information regarding the submission of your annual tribal child support budget. Lydia?
Thank you, Tammy. This is Lydia Peel. I work in the Division of Mandatory Grant. Patrick Wells is my director. Deborah Bell and I partner together to try to review your package, budget package, when it's sent into the office. The preferred way that we would like you to submit your budget is through the Grant Solution system. However, it's not mandatory. You still can submit your budget through the mail system, which would be UPS, Federal Express. However, if you go that route, there's additional costs associated with that. It would be much less costly if you would submit it through the Grant Solution system. If you decide to submit it through the hard copy, then we would ask that you would submit that package to the Commissioner, Office of Child Support Enforcement, Attention Tribal Support Program, 330 C Street Southwest, 5th floor, Washington, D.C., 20201. Okay, and the next thing that we have for you is just a screenshot of the Grant Solution system if you decide to go that route, which is a very friendly system. So we would ask that you would just try it. And some of the benefit of using Grant Solution is a big cost saving, as I mentioned previously, that it's less costly than mailing your package through the hard copy method. And it also allows you to have a real-time notification. That means if we cannot accept something on your budget package, we can relate that information to you through the system, and it will notify you that there's something that we would need to talk with you about, and we can put it specifically in the note what other requirement that is needed from you. And it also, if you would like to find out the status of your information that you had submitted to us, you can go through Grant Solution and see the status at that time. And also, again, you can communicate with OGM and OCS through grant notes that we have a section in there in the Grant Solution. If you just want to talk to us through the system, you may do that. And it helps you with your budget management. We're talking all about Grant Solution system. Now, we also would like to bring to your attention some pitfall that you will avoid if you use the Grant Solution system. It would ensure you that you're using the 424 application and the 424A budget summary online fillable form located on the Grant Solution website. And if you use that particular system, it balances the information out for you so you can be assured that you're not duplicating something, you're not leaving anything out. The system will help you to rectify that particular part of your report. And it also helps you to verify that information submitted on the narrative portion of the budget match with the information submitted on the standard form 424A. I know we all try to do things as perfect as possible. Sometimes we have human error, and this will help us a lot with our human error. And we can identify each item designated for non-federal match or either cash in kind. And we talked a little about that previously concerning the cash and the in-kind, the difference concerning the judge's salary, if he's working with you to support the program. If he's actually receiving a cash payment from you, then that's cash to support the non-federal match. But however, if he's doing it free of charge, no cash is exchanged, then we would consider that a third party in kind. Therefore, there is not a cash, but it's an in kind match. There's some additional pitfall that you would avoid. Uploading a copy of your current indirect cost rate, that would help us to the reviewers to see that you see your indirect cost rate that had been given to you, issued to you through the Department of Interior, a copy. If you do not have a copy, like was mentioned before, of the current cost rate, indirect cost rate, then please send a copy of your proposal that you are asking for a new negotiated rate. Either one of those two will be justified as filling that issue of indirect cost rate that is necessary and needed if you would like to use that instrument. The next thing is uploading the budget. Another pitfall that you would avoid is uploading your budget narrative, indirect cost rate agreement, or any other supporting document as individual or separate document. And it will help you to just make sure, if you follow your checklist, that you have sent in those things that is needed. Also, another pitfall that you may avoid when you set up message alerts for all persons who should be notified. We can do that for you if you're in the grant solution system. If anyone touches your account in any way, you will be notified immediately that some additional effort had been acted on upon your account. So that would help you to be in ahead and get a head start on things that needs to be done to your account. And also, with the grant solution system, there are some support that is provided for you. If you would go to the address that is listed at the bottom in blue and click onto that, it will give you the call center, the hours that is open and the hours that is closed, and it also would present to you frequent asked questions. Any question that you had been frequently asked concerning the grant solution system, you can find those questions right there. And it also provides for you training videos that is, sometimes we accept new systems and we don't quite understand how it works. Here we have a training video session that will help you and prepare you to use the grant solution system effectively. And it also have new users information. And that is what we have here concerning the grant solution system. And it's a very friendly system. And all I can say to you is, why don't you just try it? I bet you would like it. Thank you so much. I would turn it over now to Paige.
Thank you, Lydia. So I just want to close today with some thoughts about the Tribal Child Support Budget Packet, the guidance and the tools. As we've said a couple of times during this webinar, these new budget tools are not mandatory, but we do think that they would be very helpful to you. A recording of this webinar training is going to be available on the Budget Toolbox, in the Budget Toolbox section of the OCSE website. And we have an additional webinar on allowable costs scheduled for May 26th. I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration in using all these wonderful tools that we've developed in an attempt to make everyone's life and the budget process a little bit less complicated. If you've got questions about the Budget Toolbox, please contact your regional program specialists. They are there to help you and willing to walk through this process with you. If you have other budget questions, please contact either Lydia Peel or Deborah Bell. Their information is on this slide. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that this information is helpful to you. That concludes my portion of the webinar.
Thank you. And this concludes today's conference call. You may go ahead and disconnect at this time.